Hello everybody, welcome to week 4 of our course Introduction to the Achaemenids. Last session we learned about what happened roughly between the assassination of Xerxes I to the very last of the Achaemenids, Darius III, and the end of the dynasty. Today we will still speak about the Achaemenids, but through the eyes of their neighbors. Such a vast empire was in contact with many different cultures and civilizations, and I wanted to bring you an overview of how the relationships between the Iranian dynasty and their surroundings was. Of course, due to time limitations, this will be brief, but hopefully interesting enough for you to start making your own questions and exploring a little further. Okay, then here we go, off to the borders of the empire. So why should we worry about the relationships the Achaemenid dynasty had with those surrounding them? Well, do you remember our favorite word? Context. The neighboring powers contribute to create the complete picture of what the Achaemenid Empire was really like. And not only because of the conflicts or military movements, but also because of trade, cultural exchange, the trade of ideas, and the mixing of traditions. You would be surprised by this following sentence, perhaps, but without Greece, without Egypt, or without India, which will be the three powers that we will talk about today, Achaemenid Iran may have looked completely different. And for this session, I am asking something from you. Try to see the exchange and relationships between cultures with clean eyes. Sure, there were armed conflicts, and we humans rejoice in describing them at length, but that was not my intention when I thought about including this session in our course. I want you to perceive exchange on a perspective that is not sugar-coated, but it also is different from the eternal story, they hated each other, they fought constantly. Exchange shapes cultures, and then we have the privilege to study them. As I mentioned, we are going to discuss about 3 different cultures that interacted with the Achaemenids. And the first one will be Greece, or Hellas to be more precise. Contacts between Greece and Iran were constant and tight-knit given the geographical location of both powers. They started the interaction early, already at the times of the Medes, and after the rise of Cyrus, the Achaemenid satrapies of Lydia, Phrygia, Ionia or Caria kept great of the Hellene population, and the cultural exchange was inevitable. Notable is the Ionian revolt around 499 before Common Era, the prelude to the Greco-Persian Wars, and the Peace of Callias, a treaty allegedly established by the Delian League led by Athens and the Achaemenid Empire. Why do I say allegedly? Because the existence of said treaties is debated. The Hellenistic authors do not seem to meet an agreement, and there exist contradictions and arguments both in favor and against, even in the contemporary sources. So, piece of knowledge about this, I did not know when I started researching for this course. Yet another argument to keep on revisiting the sources we already have. What appears to be true is that in 449 before Common Era, an embassy led by Callias, the ambassador the treatise is named after, visited Susa and had a personal audience with Artaxerxes I. Regarding all the military encounters, the Achaemenids supported and fought the different powers in Hellas, especially Athens and Sparta, according to their own interest. The Iranians knew how to carefully watch Hellas's internal conflicts, and they did take advantage of some of them. For example, they had a significant meddling during the Peloponnesian War, where they supported Sparta. See, not everything is black or white. Not so long ago, the Hellenic powers were fighting against the Iranians just to jump at each other's neck the moment Xerxes walked back to Parsa, and then what once was enmity became friendship. What can I say? Humanity. But As we were saying earlier, there was a world beyond war and conflict. Anatolia was included in the Achaemenid Empire for 3 generations, and there is evidence of exchange practically everywhere. The Western satrapies were influenced artistically, for the imperial iconography developed at Susa and Persepolis was transported and reproduced there too, to the satrapies' capitals. The visual language of the Achaemenids traveled in every form, from large, impressive buildings to coins, pieces of jewelry, cylinder seals, textiles, and much more. Because that is a great point of consideration, trade and the exchange of luxury goods. The material culture traveled between both powers via commercial relations, loot, and diplomatic relations. Hellas was introduced to materials like glass, or teuretics, which is the process of working in metal. But there were also exchanges of food, clothing, music, and people, because in both places slaves were for sale as well. Language is the vehicle for culture. It is attested that the Western satrapies spoke Persian perfectly, and with language, ideas travel as well. We should not forget about the migration between the 2 regions. Immigrants have existed since the beginning of time, and they moved eastwards and westwards. Greek communities came to the dominions of the Achaemenids to live, and Iranian groups also moved to Hellas. I say more, then we have evidence through the Persepolis archive of Hellenistic people living in the empire and occupying positions of relevance for the administration. There are vast examples of written Greek in the Iranian plateau, and they are not coincidental examples. Greek presence in the Achaemenid court was usual. And finally, we have travelers. We have not invented traveling, Bachar, nor did the 19th century. People have moved, travel for knowledge or pleasure, constantly. During the Achaemenid period existed in Hellas the notion of a much more elevated science in the East. The belief that should one venture eastwards, they would return wiser and enlightened. And this is where I'd like to emphasize the importance of the Achaemenid Empire as a bridge between Greece and India. I wish I had more time to expand on this, but we have to keep going. Just note that even philosophy in Greece was influenced not only by the Iranian thought, but also by the Indians via the Achaemenid connection. And since we have already established contact with India, he will be staying for the next part of the class. There were not 1, not 2, but 3 different satrapies of the Achaemenid Empire located in India: Hindush, Satagidya, and Gandhara. These were regions on the northwest of the Indian subcontinent and mostly would place them in what today is Pakistan. You could find somewhere on the internet that the first contact the Iranians had with India was through Cyrus II. That is only partially true. Remember that, after all, the Iranians were once Indo-Iranian tribes that precisely came to the Iranian plateau from the Indus Valley. After the migrations, the northwestern zones of India maintained trade relationship with the Middle East, but it would be with the military expansion of Kurosh that they would become officially a part of the empire. Around 535 before Common Era, we believe that Kurosh made it to the west banks of the Indus River and created the satrapy of Gandhara, at least according to the Behistun inscription. Then it followed Satagidya, that we think should be near Gandhara, but the actual location is still debated today. And the last one, Hindush, was founded by Dara, corresponded to the Indus Valley properly. We also don't know for certain the area these satrapi occupied. Among the most significant cities in the eastern satrapies, we have the city of Taxila, at the crossroads of the main trade routes that cross Asia and traveled westwards to the Iranian plateau. We have evidence not only of Iranian population, but also Greek. There is a mention by Strabo regarding the visit of Iskandar to the city that one of his companions, Aristobulus, noticed the abundant presence of vultures. Scholars believe that could possibly indicate the performance of exposition funerary rites by Zoroastrians. They were also followers of Buddhism living in this area. This city, let me tell you, is to get lost into. Fascinating. Through the presence of the Achaemenid Empire, astronomical and astrological knowledge was transmitted to India from Babylon, which was among the earliest places in which astronomy fully developed. And in this exchange, the Achaemenids also exported elements to the Indian scientific knowledge, especially regarding omens and astronomy. Also, in architecture, the rock-cut buildings, such as the tombs of Chayita, present the evolution from wood to stone buildings that may have been slowly but steadily influenced by Achaemenid styles. And last but not least, we have the famous pillars of Ahsoka, but not Ahsoka Tano. Shout out to all the Star Wars fans out there. We are talking about a series of monumental columns dispersed through India that could potentially be of Achaemenid or Hellenistic influence. They were erected during the reign of the third Mauryan emperor, Ashoka the Great. What do you think? I don't believe the answer is unique, and my thoughts are that both Hellas and Iran influenced the Indian architecture, and the Indians came up with their own take for monumental pillars. And finally, we have made it to our last destination of the journey, the ever-famous and noble Egypt. Psammetichus III, the last pharaoh of the 26th dynasty, was defeated by Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus, at the Battle of Pelusium in 525 before Common Era. If that name sounds familiar to you, this is the battle in which supposedly the Iranians threw living cats to the Egyptians because they would not dare harm their sacred animals, and thus gained advantage and won. If you ask me, I would be sufficiently surprised if anyone would throw a cat at me, regardless of my sacred pantheon, but whatever. At this earlier stage, Egypt was joined with Cyprus and Phoenicia, and thus became a satrapy of the Achaemenid Empire. It is from Egypt that we preserve the only exempt statue of an Achaemenid king, that being Dada. Of course. Exempt statues were not a tradition in the Iranian plateau, so this is one of a kind. At the base of the statue, the different satrapies are listed in hieroglyphic cartouches. That was the official fashion. So yes, this statue is quite significant. Why? Because Dada was used in art and bilingualism as a political tool. The King of Kings was recognizing the importance of the Egyptian culture. Dada sought to sympathize with the Egyptian elites, knowing that the satrapy had enough personality, self-defining authority, and character to give problems in the future, which happened. Thus, he created the navigable waterway from the Nile to the Red Sea from Bubastis. This was marked along the way by 4 large bilingual stelae, both in hieroglyphics, Egyptian, and Old Persian cuneiform. As happened with Hellas, Egypt's geographical proximity generated an abundant trade. Many Achaemenid manufactured goods were in circulation, especially gold bracelets and necklaces, and this may have come in the form of commerce, loot, and again, diplomatic relationships. Gifts were very common between the high circles of society. Some statues are represented wearing Achaemenid garments, referring to pieces of jewelry which may indicate a symbol for status. As humans, we perceive something important as a synonym for higher quality. Regarding religion, as I mentioned before, Egypt had a strong personality. The Achaemenids were not particularly preoccupied with imposing a new form of cult, and the relationship with the priest were of vital importance. Sometimes the King of Kings would commission the construction of a temple, like Dada did with the temple of Amon of Hibis, which still stands in the Karja Oasis. There is vast evidence of both documents in Aramaic and Egyptian, and because you've listened to the first session, you know why Aramaic is relevant. The capital of the satrapy during the Achaemenid period was established in Memphis, and the model of government followed closely what the court at Susa dictated. However, many aspects from the area were kept: administrative and judicial division, coinage, measurements. The King of Kings appointed locals as members of the administrative system to make sure things would continue as normal as possible. And that would be all for the session of the week. I loved venturing beyond the borders of the empire, and I hope you did too. Remember that should you have any questions, you can come to the weekly streams or make them in the live session, or you can join the discussion topic in the designated week on Google Classroom. Have yourselves a beautiful day, but ciao. Khudafez.